So we're here with Mr. Professor Pim de Boer from the University of Amsterdam, Professor for the Cultural History of Europe. Now looking back at the conference, looking back at the workshops you were hosting today, what turned out to be the most pressing issues and how far did they match your expectations of what would be the most pressing issues?
Well, it matched my expectations, for I didn't come with great expectations, so to speak. But the most interesting thing for me were the concrete project for commemorating differently than in the past. And so one of these examples is the Europeana in the First World War. That was a sort of crowdfunding enterprise. They asked in different cities in Europe to come up with memorabilia of the First World War. And then those road shows, so to speak, in Eastern Europe, they were extremely fruitful, and a lot of people came with with the passport or the memories or other trench art things of their grandfathers or great-grandfathers, photographs, and these memorabilia were digitalized. They are now also online and indexed in a very crude way, but you can see it. And there came out that people were so eager, for example in Cyprus and in Slovenia and in Serbia, to come to these road shows with their memorabilia in order to have an explanation what it was, so to speak. And you need the European level in order to find explanations for these memorabilia of the family, because the situation has so much changed, so to speak. So if you try, you will not find the same explanation in the national context. And so it was a huge success, and I think there will be a comparable project which will enrich bottom-up memories from the Great War and later periods. So that was one of the interesting things. And another thing which I mentioned in my presentation is the commemoration by a ring of remembrance. That's a new monument on the killing fields of northwest France, in which there's a huge ring of metal, and they are sustained by kind of pillars which are engraved all the names of the more than 1 million fallen soldiers, but in alphabetic order. So I find it a very ironic way to commemorate if all the victims, all the soldiers, irrespective of their nationality, are commemorated. So I think that is how we have to commemorate in the future those bloody battles, to think not of nationality, but to beware that Europe was the most bloody continent it ever gave in past times, and we started the European experiment, so to speak, which the leitmotif, the most important idea, was peacemaking between the French and the Germans, of course, and they succeeded. Of course, there are now other problems, but so it's human history, so we will have always battles and fights. But for Europe, that was a very how do you say, a very clever undertaking after the war, after so many wars, to try to stop the bloodshed.
If I can just ask that, do you think that people will ever be fine with letting go of nationality in terms of remembering their own history? Will they ever be okay?
Oh no, they never will. You see it with the football matches. Nationality is so much inhammered that you can't get rid of them. But I think everybody will be conscious that of is perhaps not so conscious how murderous nations can be. And well, the European experiment is not a bloody experiment, on the contrary. And they were perhaps, well, it's crude to say it, in an interview after this successful conference, perhaps we must not too much commemorate, but we must focus to the future. So I will not plea for a 0 hour, so to speak, but European experiment became a success by not insisting on war memories.
Now you've already mentioned the concrete projects that have been taking place to commemorate or to deal with commemoration processes. Yeah. How do you think, or who are actually the relevant actors nowadays in commemoration work besides these concrete projects or groups?
Well, I would say beware of politicians who propagate certain commemorations. And we had an example in my workshop of the actual problems in Bosnia, in which, as far as I understood, daily life is not very much bothered by all these ethnic antagonism, but the politicians, they want to commemorate as a sort of weapon in order to hammer in their awful memories. Of course they have, but it is top-down fueled, this sharp opposition in different compositions, different commemorations. And I know that, for example, of which I'm vice president, the International Committee of Historical Sciences, they tried to organize a conference in Sarajevo, but it is also impossible to organize that, for there are so many antagonisms that in the end we ended in Paris in the UNESCO Palace for this commemoration of the beginning of the wars.
The workshops today in a way confirm your perception of the state of a common European culture of commemoration. Do you think there's a...
Well, I think there is a lot of work to be done, and especially among the younger generation, so at school. And I'm not in favor of propagating a new European identity, but I think in order to explain national history, you need the European context, and then you see comparable things, comparable processes. You see also what we have in common and what is dividing us. So I think that history teachers, and of course I am a history teacher, we could do more about the European dimension of history to learn to our children at school and the students on a higher level. And there is still much work to do on that front.
Okay, thank you very much.